Hello, everyone. My name is Gina Lucarelli. I'm the team leader for Knowledge and Innovation here at United Nations Development Office, Operations Coordination Office. Welcome to the first of monthly drop-in series on UN Info, which is a system we're developing to take the UNDAF into the digital age. I'm joined here by several colleagues, and we know many of you are online from countries and from agencies, so we're looking forward to discussing with you this system that we're building and the benefits we think it'll bring to our work. So let me just introduce who we've got in the room here before we'll kick it off. I'm joined here by Peter Sereni, who's going to be fielding questions in the Q&A session, Maria Blanco, Abigail Taylor-Jones, Fred Mattis, and Jesse Forsyth. So we're the team here to answer your questions. Maybe just to say on technical issues, if you can't hear or if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to just write them in the questions box. Just put in parentheses what country you're working in so that we have a sense of where you're calling it from. We can't see that on our end on the dashboard. So this, if you can go back one. So this is, as I said, we're kicking off a monthly drop-in series on this system. We're doing this especially because this is a system meant to support the work of UN country teams worldwide and wherever possible to connect and reinforce efforts of UN agencies with their own results monitoring. We've been all talking and hoping for a long time for lessening the burden of reporting, but also advancing transparency and accountability. And so we're very much keen to keep the conversation open, even as the system is still under development. So this is the purpose here. So today is a general session, and we'll just talk about what the system is for and the updates on its development. Next month, we'll be focusing on how the system can generate international aid transparency initiative compliant reports, i.e. XML documents that are compliant with the IATI data standard. And we'll also talk a little bit about early stages of developing a real-time monitoring module. So that'll be in April. And then in May, we're very much hoping that some of our early adopters will have a good set of data to look at. And then we'll just sit back and see how the system is generating data on UN investments vis-a-vis sustainable development goals. So we're joined here in New York with some colleagues from headquarters, and they may be coming in throughout. So please, if you do come in, just come in and sit down and join us. But we have many people online. So let's, just to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about today. These are the main areas. We'll talk about UN Info and the benefits we think it brings, the kinds of data UN Info can generate. We're going to try and sell you on the benefits because we know there's a lot of country colleagues online, and we're really hoping to get a critical mass of countries with data in the system so that we can start looking at, analyzing, and learning from that data. We'll talk a little bit about Common Data Standard, which we're trying to use to promote comparability among countries, UN country teams. And finally, we'll look at our early adopters countries, some of whom I think are even online. So hello to you all out there, the early adopters. And for those of you who are hearing about it for the first time, we'll have some of the kind of the checklist for onboarding if you would like to take this step and digitize your UNDAF. Finally, at the end, we'll just give you a heads up on what parts of the system are still under development in case you want to hear more about those in future sessions. So let me then hand over to Peter, who is going to administer a poll. This is just a quick question for you all so we understand how much you know and what you're interested in learning most about. So if you can see the question there, which is up, Are you learning for UN Info for the first time today? If you can just select an answer, that'll help us know who our audience is so we can tailor this presentation accordingly. So we'll just give this a few seconds to let you all answer this poll.
Okay, I think just to jump in, I think we have about 82% of people have voted. If you would like to vote, please do so now so we can move on with the presentation. Okay, I think I'll close it. Okay. Great. Now let me just publish the results. Okay, so we see that for 56% of listeners today, attendees, this is their first introduction to UN Info, and then 44% have been introduced to it before. Okay, great. Cool. Gina?
Great, thanks. So let me hand over to Abigail, who will take us through the UN Info system, its objectives.
Thank you, Gina.
Abigail is our project manager for UN Info.
Thank you, Gina. So as Gina said earlier, the main purpose of UN Info is to enhance transparency and accountability. So the first slide you see there, what we're trying to communicate here is exactly that, but also to say at the same time, this is trying to take UN, the UNDAF process from an offline process to an online process. So effectively digitizing the UNDAF. UN Info will also have an aspect of digitizing the business operation strategies. However, today we will focus more on the UNDAF side of it. So it is a system that is going to help us to enhance transparency and accountability by having all UNDAFs in one place, and therefore, as you can see, we will be able to have easy access to all key stakeholders, including government and the general public, and we will speak to that point later on. Yeah, so so to next slide, Peter. So what is UN Info and what does it do? So it is effectively a multifaceted tool in that it is for planning, monitoring, and reporting. So in terms of planning, as I said, digitizing the process, taking it online, this ensures that the planning will actually happen directly on UN Info by entering your UNDAF and your joint work plans. And this ensures that we have data that kind of gives us an overview of the UN development's contributions effectively in terms of development as a whole, specifically by the UNDAF, but also at the same time vis-a-vis the SDGs. It is a monitoring system as well in that it has been built with flexibility in that it encourages more frequent monitoring of the implementation of the UNDAF. At the same time, it will also ensure that we're able to monitor the financial aspects of the UNDAF as well, because the common budgetary frameworks will also be part of your data that is entered onto the system. And then it is a reporting system in that once you track regularly, the regular monitoring will ensure that we're able to take course corrections as we move forward. And at the same time, the way the data will be passed through the system, there will be a number of reports that countries will have access to. So I think at the moment there are 16 or 17 different kinds of reports that you can access from the system by just the press of a button. And one of these reports specifically will be pulling all the key information and data that is required in terms of putting together the one UN country results report. And this is also, the system will also obviously ensure that we're able to measure progress more accurately and also better program management as we move forward. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Frederick, who's going to speak to why UN Info is important.
Good morning. So we're not doing UN Info just for the sake of doing UN Info. I think it aligns quite well with the current SG reforms. And we also had discussions with the Deputy Secretary General, and she is incredibly keen on making those UNNAVs, a new generation of UNNAVs, really making it the single most important UN planning tool, but not only from a process point of view, but also from a content view. And as you know, her previous function was linked to the SDG agenda and the 2030 agenda, so it's very clear that the new UNNAVs will have to reflect a complete overview of the total UN's contribution to the 2030 agenda. We've tried to do this through Excel sheets, very difficult to do. UN Info and the colleagues will present this later, will actually facilitate this quite well. We are still not doing that well on the budgetary frameworks. If you look at the data that you have provided to the UNDG information management system, the budgetary framework is still scoring the least. The SG reforms are really asking for a clear budgetary framework. Again, UN Info will be able to facilitate this with giving a transparent overview of who does what where with what kind of resources. And then very importantly, there's a big push to have a better focus on results and transparency, including the one UN country results reports. You'll see this throughout this presentation when we talk about IATI, about the one UN country results report. This is really key in UN Info and in the current discussions of the UN reforms. And lastly, UN Info will also help to have better evaluations. It is not an evaluation tool itself, but by having the data all in one place with a lot of reports, as Abigail has mentioned, it will be much easier for an independent evaluator to look at the past cycle of your UNNAVs and have all the information together and actually make a better evaluation together with all the stakeholders involved. So big expectations on the UNNAV, and UN Info will actually be able to facilitate a lot of that. Of course, it's up to the UN country teams to ensure that you provide the information into UN Info.
Thank you, Fred. So now we know that a number of country colleagues online. So we're going to speak a little bit to what are some of the benefits of UN Info at the country level. So as you can see in the middle of the circle there, we believe that UN Info will help towards better tracking of development results in relation to the UNDAF. And then I'll just go through the different, the smaller circles there very quickly, and then we can elaborate more on this during the Q&A session. So we believe that UN Info is going to help in terms of improved collaboration. And why do we say this? Because it will be easy access to have an overview of who's doing what, where, and in which geographical location, and also with which partners. And then the second one there is speaking to having more country-specific data, country context-specific data. So UN Info, we believe, will provide the tools for UN country teams to be able to track and monitor and also have a more up-to-date relevant data and information. And ultimately, we think this will help in also you supporting national development plans. And then the third circle there talks about more up-to-date overview, and I think this speaks for itself in that the more frequent monitoring we have, the more up-to-date overview we will have in terms of of interventions at the country level. And then the next one there is about better cooperation with non-resident agencies. We also think that having a standardized platform will enable NRAs to better participate and engage more easily in the planning, implementation, and reporting of the UNDAF at the country level. And then the next one there is about more improved analysis. And again, this speaks for itself in that the more frequent monitoring we do, the more we know where gaps are, the better analysis we will have of our data and ultimately of development results. And then also we have spoken to the issue of transparency before. Again, we believe this will help increase transparency both internally and externally. So for example, we'll be able to see where funding gaps are, and also we'll be able to see where indicators are missing, baselines, for example, and therefore it will help to have better program management decisions moving forward. And then we also think that UNInfo, we believe that UNInfo will also help decrease the transaction cost when it comes to the planning and monitoring of UNDAFs at the moment, because it will be taking us to kind of a more harmonized way of planning and reporting jointly. And then, so those are some of the benefits. Just a quick overview. We can go into more detail in this during the Q&A. And then the next slide is, here's just an example of what we've been talking about. UNInfo will be able to give us the information of who is working with whom. So for example, this is data taken from UNCT Tanzania, and also who is working where. So as part of this, we will have 3W maps that will indicate where activities are located, and therefore we can see where the activities where maybe the same agencies are working together at the same time. And finally, to say we'll be able to see who is funding which activities also at the country level. So this having all this information in one place will obviously enhance coordination as well from a country level perspective. And then the next slide, here's just to give you a snapshot of what the system will look like when you enter the system. So as you can see, UNInfo will be a suite of apps, and as you can see, one of those apps in the middle there is the UNDAF one. And this gives us the flexibility in that we can add to UNInfo as we go along any other modules that are deemed to be important to be as part of the system. So I will stop there and hand over to my colleague, Jesse.
Thank you, Abigail. For the next few slides, we're going to focus on one of the key outputs of UNInfo, and that is the data visualizations. We are planning to have two different forms of visualizations, one a public-facing and two an internal-facing. On the screen here are an idea and examples of our public-facing dashboards. And as we mentioned at the top of the presentation, one of the key ways of digitizing the UNDAP is to show how we contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. So that visual there on the right is a draft version of how we show financial contribution to the SDGs as a UNCT. On the left side, a very quick idea of a UNCT website that pulls information from the UNDAP through UNInfo. So you have top line information that's also basically live data as well. So as the information is uploaded, the visuals change. It's not static anymore, it's digitized, so it's alive. One of the things that we are getting a lot of excitement for, driving a lot of excitement for, is the idea of an actual map that demonstrates just where we work within a given country. This information is pulled from a Tanzania example. It was live data. It's a bit static now, but the idea of showing where we work, how we work, and who we work with. We have geographic tags within UNInfo that are enabled by GIS. So we're able to actually use this new wave of technology to demonstrate live information both for 4W. Going back to the SDGs, we can demonstrate through using UNInfo the financial details on SDGs. So I'll give you a second to kind of digest this visual. It is an actual example from Tanzania where their budget is going toward the SDGs in the country. So it's a simple graph, but it has major implications for our communication purposes and our delivery purposes. And another big thing we're doing, we're not just focusing on SDGs, we're also bringing in the targets. So this information here on the screen, again, real life information from Tanzania example on the top 3 targets they're contributing to for SDG 1. We also can pull in additional information. It's not just financial, but we can also tag it to the different agencies that are contributing. So we can slice it up different ways to demonstrate how we're working towards the SDG achievement. And this is a fun one. I enjoyed this one. I'll give you a second to kind of digest what you're seeing here, then I'll walk you through it kind of slowly. What you see on the screen here is the financial flows of information basically based on our partners. On the left, you have the top 10 contributors, or source of funders, to UNCT Tanzania, where that information is going through, where that contribution is going by SDG, and then the implementing partner on the right side. So this is basically aggregated to the top 10 on either far column, the right and the left, with an 11 tag for kind of an aggregate of all the other sources, whether on the left, the source of funds, or on the right, the source of implementing partner. Now this may look a bit much, but it's actually really interesting. When we visualize data, we actually get to tell new different stories that you won't be able to find, but just looking at something like a table on Excel. That's really the purpose of digitizing UN Info. For instance, on the right, even though we have a large block of other implementing partners, which immediately tells me that we have a wide variety of partnerships, the top 10 partners by aggregate, most of them are government agencies. So again, we're telling the story that the UN's primary partner in a given country is the government. And on the left, you have all these different source of funds, all these different partners that contribute to our agenda, our plans. But the third one to the top there, that nice little yellow block, that's core funding. And you can see, you follow the traces, our core funds in Tanzania hit practically every SDG. And that right there is a key talking point. We are funding the SDGs themselves. So that's a quick idea of the output of UN Info. Now I'm going to switch and talk more about the input. Now on our UN Info system, we asked our early adopters to upload both their UNDAF and their joint work plan. And the reason we have the joint work plan is that's where we get a lot of our granular details. On the screen we have tags and markers. This information we ask all our early adopters to tag each key activity, the major programs and projects, by this different kind of demographic and other information, such as, of course, the SDGs, agency, implementing partners, and even OECD-backed sector. We've already seen how that can be visualized in the previous slides. The markers act just the same as tags in terms of functionality. We also can track kind of our human rights, our gender. We have a new sustaining peace. Those basic markers that are based on a 0 to 3 scale, based on contributions. And I'll say one more thing on that last at the bottom there, IATI. We talked at the very beginning of the presentation about data standardization. UN Info is taking the IATI platform, the IATI idea, and operationalizing it. A lot of our tags and markers are linked to the same code lists in IATI, so we are working on creating the standardization. And we look forward to continue the process that IATI has started. And here we have and we're going to throw it over to Maria. I'm going to throw it over here to Maria to talk more about a more public-facing.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you very much for that. So all this information just shown through the graphs will be published in UN country team websites. All the graphs that Jesse has just shared, all these dashboards and beautiful infographics will be published in UN country team website. And in this slide that you can see now, we have tried to capture the information flow. So from on the left-hand side, you have our colleagues, which at the moment are early adopters, right, entering data in the system. And then specific data points, such as the ones that Jesse has just shared, will be shown on the relevant UN country team website. So you have the colleagues entering the data then into the system, which is like the little square of like on top. And then we have chosen specific data points to show through the dashboards that we have just seen into our UN control team's websites. And as our colleague Abigail mentioned at the very beginning, the ultimate goal of UN Info and of pulling specific information to UN control team websites is to actually promote a more transparent UN system. We are currently working on developing the templates for a new generation of UN control team websites, and countries joining UN Info will be embedded to migrate their current sites to the new platform being developed at the moment. And that's a snapshot of what the new UN control team websites will look like.
We have a question coming in now. Do you want to take questions at the end? Okay.
Yeah.
Take questions at the end. Okay.
I think we are kind of almost done. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
So, so how will UN entities access UN Info, access the platform? There are currently two ways. One, by registering via the local in-country UN Info administrator, and the other one will be via what it's called right now Common Connect. This is a single sign-on system developed by the UN, which will enable users to access UN Info with agency login credentials. Not all agencies are currently on Common Connect. The actual list at this point includes the International Civil Aviation Organization, OCHA, UNDP, UNFPA, UNOPS, UN Women, and the International Computer Center. UNHCR is currently being onboarded. I mean, we are trying to promote this single sign-on system because it will facilitate user login to the system. The cost is very minimal per agency. It's 2,400 per agency. So we feel it's like a minimal cost that will bring a lot of benefits in terms of accessing the platform. And then I will give the floor now to Gina to explain the next slide.
Sure. So the principle we're applying here is one borrowed from the world of the International Aid Transparency Initiative standard, right, which is publish once, use multiple times. So what we're trying to do here, where possible, is to have colleagues put data into a system once and then be able to pull it out for different purposes. So one application of what that would mean, and one that we are very often asked about, especially from colleagues from the country level who tend to have, in a way, double reporting burden, both for their agency and for the UN system as a whole, is to connect agency results systems to UN Info. So it is possible, it is not yet in place. We just kind of want to make that clear right now. We have a pilot project going, working with Naveen Haram from UN Women, whereby we are building a connection, that's what an API is, application program interface, between their results system and UN Info so that we can pull data from one to the other. Again, this is all meant to lessen the burden at country level for data entry and reporting. But it is built in such a way that it can accommodate this. In order for this to work, both sides need to kind of shake hands, essentially. Most systems need to become friends, which means that agencies interested in doing this, we would love to test this out in more agencies than UN Women, but we would need you within the agency to find the right person, to get the right approvals, to shake hands with UN Info.
On this slide, you see the countries that we are currently already working with. Not all of those countries have all their data online, so if you're out there, please continue putting in your data because we really want to show some results. We have about 20 countries now that are in the process of starting or already advanced inputting in their data. That's about 15% of the UN country teams. But of course, we want to have more. Next. So if you would like to be part of this group of colleagues, this is basically what we're looking for in a nutshell. One, having a functional UNAF, preferably not one that's in the last year of implementation, because it's a bit of an effort to put everything in only for 1 year. You have joint work plans, which clearly shows who does what where with what kind of funding. That basically means like you have your outputs, your key activities, the lead agency, implementing partners, and your available and to be mobilized resources. You have a UN country team that's keen to explore the idea of UN Info, and you have a focal point in the RCO that can act as the country administrator. The way we are normally working is if we get a request from a UN country team or an RCO, we start with a general presentation as we do here, but a little bit more detailed to UN country teams. UN country team has a discussion, they can ask us questions. Once they see like, this is actually a fantastic idea, and it is a fantastic idea, of course, we ask them to get a short message from the resident coordinator, and then we basically will start making your work plan, your workspace online, and Jesse will be providing several technical trainings to the RCO, to the UNCT, to the results groups, however you are set up at the country level. And Jesse is there 24/7 to answer your questions on the technical aspects or any challenges that you might experience. So there's quite a lot of very good guidance available for all the countries that wish to go online. Next.
So we'll open it up for questions and answers at this point. I think we already have a couple colleagues who have written in their questions. So we'll kick it off with that.
Sure. Would you like me to read off the first question? Great. Okay. So the first question is from Khalid Sailan. If you could also maybe note where you're writing from, which country you're working, that would be great. And Khalid's question is, can you please tell us how much of UN Info is public and how much of it is internal to the UN? Gina, do you want to take that?
Sure. Hi, Halide. Nice to see your name anyway in the chat box, even if we can't see you. So essentially the way it works is this. So you enter the data in a database, which is mostly behind a login, right? Which is mostly not public. However, what we showed you were the examples we have thus far of public dashboards, which will be available on UN country team websites for countries that come on board with UN Info. We will also have, I think Abigail mentioned the 16 reports. Yeah, 16, 17. Okay, 16, 17 reports that you can generate from the system. Now, those are available internally to the UN. There will also be dashboards available internally to the UN. So essentially here what we're looking at is showing information publicly which supports external coordination, which supports transparency of our operations, and hopefully even leads to accountability, and making information available internally, which supports decision-making, right? So the more programmatic type information on how to plan where projects should be in a country, or how to mainstream gender equality across the entirety of the UNDAP. That would be more internal type analysis information that we would make available for the UN users to use for their own decision making. Whereas externally, you'll see the dashboards that we showed you here.
Okay, great. Next question is from, let's see, it's from Karin in Switzerland. The 2,400 access costs per agency, is this a one-off cost or a recurring cost? Maria, do you want to take that?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question. Currently, we understand it's one-off cost for per agency, but I'm happy to contact to give you more information and get in touch with the ICC and understand the details of like agencies joining a common connect and other costs if there are any other costs. But yeah, currently we understand that it's a one-time cost. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Maria. We have a question from Rumana Khan in, I think, Bangladesh, yes. And she asks, what is the resource implications for UNCTs to be on board with UN Info? Frederick, do you want to take that question?
Sure. So financially, it's completely free. If you, as a UN country team, want to get on board, we will provide you with the workspace, and that does not have any cost for you. It, of course, will have a human resource cost. And as with every change management process, the first year will be a little bit a new way of working and getting used to the system. But we've tried to make the system as user-friendly as possible, and I think we have achieved this to a big extent. So for the RCO, initially it will be a little bit of work to set up the whole system. For example, to put in the reporting frequency, to just copy-paste the UNNAV. But once that is done, you will have to spend less time. And I think it is important to compare UN Info with the way you are working now. Currently, most UN country teams are sending around Excel sheets where 20 plus agencies are putting in their information, and then miraculously the RCO is trying to put this all together into one Excel sheets, which of course leaves a lot of room for human error, needs to go back and forth. All of that you will have not to do anymore because you will have everything in one workspace. So short answer, initially a little bit of a new way of working, a little bit of an extra workload, but eventually you will actually save quite a lot of time.
Great, thank you, Frederick. Okay, we have a question from Mozambique. We have seen the graphs and diagrams in the presentation. Are there examples of reports produced used UN Info that can be shared? So can we share the diagrams and visualizations that we have presented? Abigail, do you want to take that one?
Yes. They are work in progress at the moment. We obviously wanted to show you them as part of this webinar presentation. However, they're not ready to be shared out yet because we are still working with the designers, making some changes as we speak. So we will be happy to share these with you once all the feedback we have given them have been implemented and it's finalized and ready to share. We will definitely do that.
But just to say, maybe just to add to what Abigail mentioned, we know that you've made some progress in Mozambique in entering a lot of the data, and we would really like to see, we've only seen Tanzania's data, so we would really like to see, once you approve the data in the system, it'll be published, and we'd really love to see Mozambique's data in here, because as you develop these things, they're only as real as the data that's behind them. And we can keep tinkering with one set of data, but we really are trying to build here to something that'll fit 130 country teams. So keep entering your data and you can see it live. So we think you're probably the next up, the closest up, but we'd really like to see that move forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gina. We have a question from Blondine Bilher, which part of it I think has been answered by Frederick, but maybe I'll just pitch this one to you just to make sure that all aspects of the question have been addressed. For countries interested in UN Info, how long does it take from the expression of interest to an operational UN Info at country level, and what are the costs? So just on the timeline, I think.
On how long it takes, from our side, we can act quite quickly. Jesse basically doesn't sleep, so that's a good thing. But seriously, any time that you express an interest, we'll set up the UNCT discussion or the PMT or the resource groups, whatever you think is best at the country level. As soon as that is done, and we get your confirmation that you're interested to get online, you will get an Excel sheet from Abigail. As soon as you send this back, that gives us the information how to set up the workspace. It takes less than a week, and then in the meanwhile, Jesse can already do technical training. So basically, if you want, within the next 2 weeks, we could get you online if a UN country team is really motivated. And as I said, no financial costs for UN country teams.
Thank you, Frederick. Okay, we have a question from Laura Munoz from the RCO in Honduras. So actually there are 3 questions. One is, is UN Info available in other languages? How long does it take to become a member of UN? How long is the transition? I think Frederick addressed that just now. And then the last question is concerning data visualization, programming, and funds. Can they be connected with 2 or more SDGs? So let me pass the first part of the question to Abigail and then to Frederick.
Okay, so on the first question about languages, yes, the system is multilingual. It is currently in English, French, and Spanish. Those are kind of the 3 key ones we've identified for now. Obviously, moving forward, the more speakers we have of maybe other of the UN languages, we may then decide to ensure that we have maybe a fourth language. But we do have it in 3 languages at the moment. And the question related to the SDGs, I think when Jesse was speaking, he spoke about the tagging. So what we ask is that the tagging is done at the lowest level of your plan, so your joint work plans. So what we ask at the joint work plans is that you tag 3 SDG targets. You tag 1 activity to 3 SDG targets only. So that is restricted. You can only tag 3 SDGs per activity. And then with the funds for that, they will be equally divided between those 3 activities. That's the methodology we've chosen for now, because there isn't one specific methodology that the UN has. So this is one we have decided, which kind of slightly aligns with some of the thinking that is happening internationally. And of course, we will review this as we move forward. In terms of the SDG tagging of the goals, at the outcome level, you can tag as many SDG goals as you want to at the outcome level. For the activity level, that is restricted to 3 only targets. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Abigail. Okay, and this is just a reminder for those of you who have questions, please put your questions in the question box, and then we're happy to address them. We have a question from Nelson Zakapi from Namibia, and his question is it possible to share the offline version of UN Info? We need more time to familiarize ourselves with the system.
Nelson, that's a very good question. I think for you to have the offline version of the system, you actually need to come online. So we know that in some countries, connectivity is slow. So what we have done, the system is being built with enough flexibility that once you have been onboarded, you get online. Once you start your data entry, you start a little bit of data entry, then you can export an Excel sheet that you can then work on offline. And then once you've entered all your data, you can import it online. But there isn't an offline aspect of the system that we can share with you right now, but once you're on the system, you have the option of working directly online, or if you have connectivity issues, you can work offline and then come back online. So that would be my response to that question.
Okay, great. And I think Frederick wanted to just supplement that. Yeah.
Maybe just to add, I mean, Namibia is currently developing their UNNAF and it hasn't been signed. So what I would propose for a country like Namibia, who is just about to sign their UNNAF, is probably wait a couple of weeks until we have our dashboards and everything really online, because then we'll also be able to give you a bit more what you can get out of it. And given you got a new UNNAF, it's the ideal moment to go directly online. And I think, I mean, to be frank, it doesn't quite make sense to have offline versions. It's as if we would ask an offline version of Facebook. You want to put everything immediately online and actually start using the system, because you don't want to do the work twice. And as we said, there's a lot of one-on-one support. Jesse is basically spending his days doing teleconferences with UN country teams answering questions. You will also get access to a Yammer group with all the early adopters. So there's nothing to be afraid of to be online.
Yeah, come online.
Can I also just mention, I'm getting called out here. Yeah, I do sleep. The system doesn't automatically start pumping out public information when you start populating UN info. There is a way to kind of hold it back before it is published. So yes, it is constantly, it is an online platform, but the information you can contain before it's valid, before it goes public, you validate it, you can double check it. So there's really no reason to have something offline. It's actually a question we've been asked before, prior to this webinar. So we kind of encourage those who want to get on to UN Info or learn more about it. You can reach back out to us after this webinar. I'm more than happy to walk you through it again in a small one-on-one session or something else with a small number of people. Small number of messages.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a question, I think, from Yoshi, who is sitting in the room with us here from UN Environment.
Yes.
Please.
Hello. I have two questions. First one is about the cost for Common Connect. And I was wondering, the agencies who is using the Umoja system would be the same process with the other agency or not. And the second one is that talking about this visualization, after all the completion of the data inputs, can we share these visuals in our like public report, or can we use anything for the reporting? Yeah, that's two questions.
So I might maybe I can answer the first one.
Sure.
I understand that, yes, it will be also for right now in the Secretariat. If, for instance, SOCHA is part of the Secretariat, is paying its own annual contribution. So I will understand that, yes, every agency, well, every program, agency fund and program within the Secretariat should pay their own fee for Common Connect. But I'm happy to go into the details with them and give you more information on that. Yeah.
And on the second question, absolutely. I mean, so absolutely, the idea is to produce analysis which can be shared in reports, right? So the system will, once we have like many countries on the system, we'll have a global dashboard, a global entry point, right? So that agencies at the headquarters level can run agency-based reports, right? And sort of and get a sense of, you know, from the ground up, what the footprint is vis-a-vis the SDGs, vis-a-vis human rights, et cetera, et cetera. So that's definitely the case, and definitely possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. We have, right now, there are no other questions in the question box. We have a few things we'd like to do, certainly, before wrapping up. One is we have a poll. And we also have a slide on the future things that are in the pipeline. So let me just ask Gina, do you want to do the poll now? And then
Since the poll asked a little bit about what's in the slide, why don't I do the slide first?
that makes sense. Okay, perfect. Let me just get there.
So thank you all for joining this drop-in series. We're really keen to keep this conversation open and flowing. It helps us a lot as we develop. It's a big undertaking, and it's one that we've developed so far. I don't think we mentioned it, but the development process so far has really been a co-creation between us at headquarters in Doko and RC offices in Tanzania and Mozambique, and then we've piloted in about 10 countries, and now we've got early adopters in many more. So we're not intending to create a reporting system that feeds headquarters and is only suiting to that. It's meant to create value at the country level as well. So we're really keen on keeping this one. What's under development at the moment is what we're calling a real-time monitoring module. This is a feedback mechanism, a survey mechanism that can be completed over mobile phone, over messaging apps, etc., just to take in some of the innovations which are across all the agencies. Many agencies, WFP, UNICEF, many others are using these kinds of surveys. The SDG Action Campaign, you may remember, in the run-up to the Sustainable Development Goals, succeeded in crowdsourcing 10 million people on what they need for their future. So we're working with them to build a base set of questions for the My World 2030 survey within the tool. So this is also something that we're developing right now. It's not yet at a stage when we can exactly explain what it is and what it isn't because it's early, but this will be part of the system. As Maria talked about, there is this public angle to it, and this, again, we're taking a little bit our time with it because we do want to make sure, A, that the information we're showing publicly is quality, and that requires a lot of internal processes which may or may not be in place yet. And on the other hand, on the more technical side, we're trying to integrate within UN country team websites so that it's not, another system, another operating arrangement that gets clunky to integrate. We talked, Abigail mentioned the fact that the system focuses on programmatic side, but also has an operation side to it as well. So if you're interested in hearing more about these angles, we can arrange a webinar in the coming months. And then finally, we are trying to, in a way, support country teams who are staff based in different agencies, often in different offices, without a common online space to collaborate before things are public. So there's a lot of email and drafts and version control issues that happen. So we're building a sort of suite of tools to make all of this easier, right? The more this is integrated into one system, we think it'll work better. So those are the kinds of things that are under development. Why don't we now administer the last poll so we can get a sense from you all what you want to hear more about next time.
Okay, great. And just to say, Lydia Tutarinova said a webinar on all the operations module would be great, and also the BOSS module. So just to highlight some of the immediate feedback we're getting from colleagues in the field. I'm going to launch the poll right now. So take a moment to select one or more of the following options. Let me just, yeah, okay. Yeah, let me just read it off for colleagues in the room because it's a little bit small, displaying in small type on our computer in the room. We have what kind of data and reports UNInfo can generate as the first option that you can select. IATI and Common Data Standards. Second one is the potential to connect systems through APIs. And the fourth option is real-time monitoring, and the last option is the operations module. So take a moment to think about what you want to hear more of from us about UN Info and the modules that are under development, as well as issues that you think are important. If you don't find the topic that you want to hear more about in the questions box, feel free to throw it in the question box, or in some way, please feel free to get in touch with us. Right now we have, let's see, 55% of people have voted. I think that's, let me just check the question box, so we have a very active questions box at the same time. Will the webinar be circulated, the recording? Yes, and let me just say, I think Gina mentioned this at the beginning, but this webinar is being recorded. So you will receive a recording of this webinar. It will be circulated, and then we have a question from, or a request from Priya Alvarez, who is saying, could you please circulate some guidance or written materials on UN Info? Yes, we've just produced a 2-pager on UN Info. We're just sort of putting some final tweaks in it, but we're happy to share that with you as well. So I'm just going to close this poll, because I think we have a good number of 66% of people have voted. So let me just close it, and then let's look to see. Oops. Wait a minute. Share results. And let me just that. Okay. So it's hard for a couple of us to see that here in the room unless you have very good eyes, and all of you online can see it, so I'm just going to read out what we have. 77% of you has indicated that you'd like to see what kind of data and reports UN Info can generate, and then 32% indicated you want more on IATI, and 52% said you'd like to know more about the potential to connect agency systems through APIs, and then 81%, this is the winner of the day, real-time monitoring. And finally at 48%, but also significant figure, the operations module. So on that note, let me hand back to Gina. And I think that, yeah, we don't have any more questions in the questions box, Gina, so let me hand it back to you to sort of wrap up and add anything that you think needs to be injected at this moment.
Great, thank you everyone. I think just to say, I think we do have a couple questions in the question box that we didn't answer, but we wrote to you privately because they seemed like one-on-one follow-up issues. So thank you for that, Churchill and Priya. We'll follow up with you directly. And just thanks to everyone for joining. This has been extremely useful for us to know, how this is all sounding to you, what your concerns are. Just to reiterate, again, for those of you at the country level, the question here is not in terms of costs, it's really a question in terms of time, and it depends on how your programming arrangements, how far they are set up, how robust your integrated planning is across the UN system, right? Is it a one-off thing you do every 5 years and forget about, or is it something that's really live and operational? If it is live and operational, we can definitely digitize this, but it's a bit of an uphill battle to do everything at once. It does require the structures across the UN team to be ready for this kind of thing. And then for those of you joining from the agencies at headquarters level, we really are committed to this idea of reducing the reporting burden. It's very possible technologically. So, so if you will, kind of wage this battle internally within your agencies, we're happy to pick up with whoever you can convince to do this with us. So huge thanks to everyone. Do tune in on April 18th, where you will hear about real-time monitoring. At least the early stages of what we have under development. It's not a full system at that point, but it will be more of a check-in whether our thinking makes sense to all of you out there. So huge thanks to the team here for this session, and let's close this webinar if there aren't any final questions. Yep.
Thank you very much.